Thank you. So welcome to this last session of the day. The session is on symmetric key cryptanalysis, and the talk is on related key boomerang attacks on full AUN lightweight block cipher, and it's going to be given by you, Sasaki. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for introduction. So I'm Yu Sasaki from NDT, and I will talk about cryptanalysis on lightweight cipher. So this is one-page overview. So ANU is a block cipher recently designed by Dansa et al. In 2016, and smaller than any other cipher for 60-bit block and 128-bit key. So I was really interested in its security. And the designers claimed related key security for this cipher. However, unfortunately, the attacks could be applied. And so the cipher has 25 rounds, and then the related key boomerang attacks can work for practical complexity for the distinguisher, and then the complexity for the key recovery attack could be reduced as well. So the attacks, the distinguisher was verified by implementation. Okay, so lightweight block cipher means ciphers suitable for resource-constrained environment like RFID or sensor network. And so achieving small memory size, power, and hardware footprint is the goal of the lightweight ciphers. And the important parameter is the gate equivalence gates. And so according to the design of ANU, the entire RFID usually is equipped with 10,000 gates. And so the issue is how much of them we can use to ensure the security. And if you use AES or DS, I don't know why they mentioned DS, but if you use those ciphers, then you need to use more than 2,000 gate equivalents. So their goal is designing cipher which is less than 2,000 gates. And I'd like to mention some overview for ANU block cipher. So the block size is 64 bits, and the key size is either 80 bits or 128 bits. So this is like a typical parameter for lightweight block cipher. And the number of rounds is 25. And so it's like a mixture of components from many other lightweight block ciphers. And the designers claim smallest of all existing designs with 60-bit block and 128-bit key. So for example, this the table shows the comparison of the GEs. And compared to like present Simon spec and Piccolo, ANU is smaller, so which is nice results. And I'd like to briefly introduce the round function and the key schedule function of the ANU block cipher. So round function looks like a mixture of the Simon, block twine, and the Piccolo. This is my subject copy, though. So it's a 60-bit cipher, and it adapts two-branch balanced phase style. So the state is separated into left 32 bits and the right 32 bits. And they create two rotated copies of the left half, and apply the S-box layer. So this is like 8 parallel application for bit S-box. And XOR both of them, and then the first XOR to the right hand side. And then the round key is also XOR. And the pi is neighborwise permutation, so just like a position is changed. So this is the ANU round function. And when I saw it, I immediately recalled this structure, which is from Simon block cipher, designed by NSA. But they use an operation here, but in ANU they use separated S-box layer and the XOR layer. Okay. And so this is the key schedule function. So the designers said that key schedule is motivated from a present key schedule function. So now I want to focus on 128-bit key version. And so you start with 128-bit key state. And first, you extract 32 bits as a sub key. And then rotate the entire 128-bit state by 30 bits to the left. And then the S-box is applied to the two nibbles, and then the sum round number is XORed. So that's the key schedule function. And I just show the present key schedule function for contrast. Now it looks quite similar. So in the present case, I extract 64-bit sum keys, and then apply 61-bit rotation, and the remaining is quite the same. But I directly point at two big differences. The number of sub-key bits is just 32 bits in the case of ANU. So it's just like a quarter of the state, which is quite small. And rotation number is also like quite small. And this will cause some tragedy later. And this slide shows ANU's deleted key security claim. So they apparently consider that deleted key attack is important. But the unfortunate thing is they rely on too much for the about the security aspects for the non-existence of the attacks against the present. So they said that there is no successful key-related attack that has been found on the key schedule algorithm of the present. But because round function is different, then it's a bit risky to only rely on this point. And they also said that use of nonlinear components in the key schedule and XORing round Gantt have good effect to increase the security, but unfortunately none of them is not directly related to this attack. Okay, so three issues of ANU 128 key schedules. So one is the key state rotation is slow. So the state is 128 bits, but we only rotate 30 bits in the state. So it takes quite long that each key bit is back to the S-box place. And another second point is the ratio of the nonlinear updates. Only 8 bits of the state is key state is updated, which is quite small, considering that the entire state is 128. And the third one is the ratio of the sub-key bits and the entire state. So only 32 bits, the only quarter of the state is used as a sub-key. Okay, so let's analyze the key schedule function. So I tried to write 128-bit state, but due to the limited space, so each cell denotes like 2 bits. So here there are 64 cells, and in every round, rightmost 8 bits are updated by the nonlinear. So the bits which is rotated right side of the blue line are updated by nonlinear. And 32 bits are used as sub-keys, so the bits rotated right of the black lines are sub-keys. So I start with injecting just 1 bit difference here. And you can see the next round. So we rotate the entire state by 13 bits. So it will not be updated by the key, by the S-box, and then it's no longer used in the key. And I do the analysis, continue, and you can see that rotation speed is quite slow. So even after even after 8 rounds, some key will never has difference again. Yeah, and then considering that only 8 bits are updated by the nonlinear component, and the rotation number is 13, you can see that this part will move to this part. Nonlinear updates are skipped. And then I do the analysis for the next cycle, and it still takes long rounds to get the difference back to the right hand side. But again, this part is skipped. So I can see that we can control that the key difference propagation is completely linear, which helps the analysis. And yeah, you can see that for A-trans, we have no key difference, and for here also for A-trans, we don't have no related key differences. Okay, so I'd like to introduce related key boomerang attacks. So let's start from differential cryptanalysis, which you already may know that. So it was proposed by Leuven and Jamir. So the idea is preparing two print texts with some relation delta p, and then after the encryption algorithm, we expect that some particular relation, I mean C1 XOR C2, will appear with some high probability. And then in the boomerang attack, we divide the target cipher E to the first half E0 and the last half E1. And we search for the differential trail independently for E0 and independently for E1. Okay, so assume that the difference alpha goes to difference delta with probability P for E0, and similarly, gamma goes to delta with probability Q for E1. And then we can have some properties which can be which can occur with probability P squared Q squared. Okay, so I start from choosing P1 and P2 with difference alpha. So after probability P, so in the middle, they produce delta beta, I mean difference beta here, but not particular something in the C1 and C2. But then we XOR delta to compute C3 and C4. And then ask decryption oracles to return corresponding plain text. Here you can see that the output difference is delta here. Thus, the input difference should be, and in the middle, should be gamma with property Q. The same occurs in another pair. Yep. Then you can see that the difference here should be beta, and with probability P, and this will output difference alpha here. So that's the some differential propagation in the boomerang attack. Okay, and in the related case setting, it's a bit more complicated. Besides the difference alpha, we can use the difference from the key here for the easier part. And for the latter half, besides the input difference gamma, we can also have key difference defined between K1 and K3 or K2 and K4. Yeah. But one tricky thing is, so we want some key, some particular key difference in the middle. But when we define the related key oracle, we usually define the key oracle at the beginning. So that means to define the key oracle, we have to invert this difference to the original one, and then the XOR to the like K0 or K1. So the important thing is we need to invert the key difference in the middle to the plain text one. And yeah, this inversion should be done with probability 1. So otherwise, only part of the keys recovered. I mean, the dark only works for weak keys. So it's very important that the middle difference is inverted to the plain text one. And I already showed that the difference propagation in the key schedule can be linear. So actually, in the case of ANU, we can invert delta K to the plain text difference by avoiding S-bars. And one more thing, and when the results of inverting the middle difference to the beginning is equal to the difference for another pair, then the K2 becomes K3 becomes K2 and K4 becomes K1. So actually we only need 2 related key oracles instead of ordinary 4 related key oracles. So I want to say that this related key attack really requires a minimum key relations. Okay, so I try to show related key attacks on ANU. Actually, it's quite simple. So I showed before that for 8 rounds, we can ensure that no key difference is injected from the key. Okay, so we have 8 rounds here, and we set state difference 0 here. And then, I just append one more round, and the key difference just directly appears here. And in the fourth hand, key difference appears, and it will make some bit difference here. So this already goes 10 rounds. Okay? And in the boomerang attack, we can construct 2 independent trails. So we did exactly the same for the other half for E1. Okay? So it's already 20 rounds. So we have probability 1, 20 round distinction. Okay? So the number of rounds in total is 5 rounds. So we can just extend the key difference to the forward and back. And yeah, I mean, I did something complicated to optimize the propagation. And I mean, I don't explain details, but I just would like to pick out something interesting. Okay? So in the round 3, we have this propagation. So the input difference is like this. And then this will be propagated to the top half of this function and the bottom half of this function. And it will activate the 2s box here. Okay, so according to the differential distribution table, so probability 1, different input difference 1 is propagated to 9, that's probability 2 is minus 2. And the difference 2 goes to difference C with probability 2 is minus 2. And the designers of AMU always evaluate the differential probability of each S-box independently. So thus, according to their estimation, the independent probability should be 2 to the minus 4. However, I confirmed that this 2 occur simultaneously with probability 2 to the minus 3. So because they are not independent actually. So you can see that those 2 values are originated from one fixed value. So they are obviously dependent. Okay, so before rotation, the difference is in the 5th bit. And after left 3 bit of rotation, then the active neural is composed of those 4 bits. And the active neural for the bottom is composed of those 4 bits. And you can see that actually 3 bits are overlapped. It's heavy overlapped. Okay, then I check the real value that propagates from difference 1 to difference 9, and similarly difference 2 to difference C. Okay, then you can see that for those 3 bits, so out of 8 possibilities, 4 can satisfy the propagation. And the great thing is, all of 4 possibilities of those blue parts are also a valid solution for the bottom half. So it's not independent. Okay, so this probability is 2 to the minus 3. And I try to introduce another thing. So then the input has like 3 active bits. And after the rotation, 2 S-box activated here and 5 active S-box activated here. And all active difference are chosen so that the independent probability is 2 to the minus 10. But then actually this occurs with 2 to the minus 8, so we can save 1 active S-box. I can do the same analysis here, but the dependency is a bit complicated because 5 active S-box are involved. And then to check the exact probability, so I just checked it by experimentally. So only 12 bits are involved. So yeah, I just exhaustively tried to the 12 input values with those 3 active bit difference, and then compute the most frequently appears the difference. And that was also 2C95. And actually, we have several options, but I just picked this one, and then the probability was 2 to the minus 8. Okay, so in the end, so I constructed 25 trail, and then the probability of the entire trail is 2 to the minus 17. So so this is practical complexity, so I implemented a duck, so I just randomly picked 2 to the 23 print experience, and then to check like how many times the Leuven carpet was constructed. And as a result, we found 66 carpets. So the probability of the Leuven trail should be 2 to the minus 7010, which matches the theoretical evaluation very well. This is just like one example of confirming the probability. Okay. So, as a concluding remarks, so I show practical time related key distinguisher against the EMU. And the lessons that we can learn is that just combining several good designs without deep analysis is risky. I think if the designers try to search for good differential trail in the related key setting, then this case could be avoided. But in particular, reducing the number of extracted qubits per round and a small number of rotation constants really help for the attacker to construct duck. And still no attack in the single key setting, and we may modify key schedule to salvage ENU block cipher. Yep, that's all right. Thank you for your attention.
Any questions for you? No questions? I have a small question, if the designers actually made any claim for security against related key attacks when they...
Yeah, I mean, it says that they so basically, the same with the key schedule, with the same key schedule, the attack, there is no attack in the present. And yeah, they said that, actually they said that some related key
yeah, that's...
attacks in the
yeah. Okay. Let's thank you again. And then the next talk is coming just now. It's on generic round function recovery attacks for Firestone networks over small domains. And the talk will be given by Betül Durak. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Betül Durak from EPFL, and this is a joint work with my co-author also from EPFL. Since I'm going to talk about the generic attacks on Firestone networks, I'm going to start with defining what a Firestone network is. Basically, it's an iterative cipher that was invented by Dr. Firestone in IBM in the early 70s, and it takes a message from a domain D square and it encrypts it to the ciphertext in the same domain D square. So I show you an instance of a Firestone network with 4 iterations in this picture, and each iteration is basically called a round, and the round consists of 2 components. The first component is a round function, it's a secret function on domain D. And the second component is a group operation defined on D. Okay. So why are we interested in Firestone networks? It is basically because of the NIST standard that came up in March 2016. It's about the format preserving encryption. And in these standards, we have 2 algorithms called FF1 and FF3. And for FF1, we have 10 rounds of Firestone networks, and FF3, we have 8 rounds of Firestone networks. So not to be confused, so format preserving encryption is it's a completely different primitive, but it's based on Python network. The difference between the FF1 and FF3 is not only the round numbers, but also how the inputs are picked or how the key is scheduler generated. But basically we can think of these FF1 and FF3 as Python networks, to be simple. What is important here in this standard is that the domain size is really small. So when we define the FP in the integer domains as n squared, which means that the domain size is n squared, we want to be able to use this primitive on really small domains. I will get back how small the domain is, but before that I'm going to tell something about the security, because we're interested in security. So the standards define the targeted security as 120 bits of security. And we also know that the security of Python networks inherits to those primitives, FF1, specifically these two algorithms, FF1 and FF3. And so what about the security of Python networks? I'm going to give you some parameters. R is representing the number of rounds for the Python network. Q is representing the number of queries that we do for the Python network, for the attack. And n squared is just the domain size of the Python network. And it has a very long story. Python networks has a very long story of cryptanalysis, but the recent results are given by Patavan in 2010. He proved some lower bounds for parameters r equal to 4, 5 and bigger than equal to 6 under CPA, CCA security, and even non-plain text attacks for indistinguishability. So it's a very strong, the strongest sense of security that we can hope for. And he showed no indistinguishability under some parameters, under these parameters. But if you want to look at from another perspective, there is a round function recovery attack that we can look at. And information theoretically, we can say that adversary needs are over 2 times n many non-plain text in order to succeed round function recovery. So I'm going to get back to what round function recovery is, but before that, there is a trivial attack that we all can come up with. It's kind of querying the oracle with n square plain texts and getting back the results. So we don't need to do anything more because we know the code book now. So, as I promised, for round function recovery, we are basically trying to recover the round functions and to visualize it, to make it simpler to understand. A round function can be represented as this table I show you here with 2 columns. In the first column, we have the domain from, remember, I'm working on the integer domain, Zn. So my inputs are from Z to n minus 1. And the second column represents the output of these domains, these inputs. So if I recovered such a table, that will mean that I recovered the round function for the ith round. And this is going to be basically equivalent to the recovering the secret key of the ith round. So, sorry that I didn't mention that for the round functions, we can typically think of PRFs with the secret keys. But in my notations, I'm not going to use any secret keys, but you can think of PRFs as round functions, okay, the secret key. So, recovering such a round function will mean that I recovered the secret key for that round, okay? And basically, maybe the question that we want to answer is, if we want to recover those round functions first, if it is possible, or if it is not possible, is there any other way to still come up with an equivalent set of round functions? So maybe recovering the true or real round functions that has been used for encrypting the messages to their corresponding ciphertext, but we have an equivalent set of round functions. What I mean with is that the following. So I show you a 3-round Python network over here. It encrypts the message XY to ciphertext ZT in a following way. So we take the right half of the message, and we input it the first round function. We apply we add the left half of the message in order to generate the intermediate value C. We take the intermediate value C and input it to the second round function, and we edit its output to left part of the message in order to generate the right half of the message, as ciphertext T. And similarly, we take T and input it to the last round function, and we add its output to the intermediate value C in order to generate the left part of the message. Ciphertext A, sorry. So there is this tuple that defines how to encrypt XY to ZT, and there is another set of triples, round functions, that will encrypt the same message to its corresponding ciphertext same way. So we take the right half of the message, and instead of so we just add a data value to the output of the first round function, and this additional data value will go to the intermediate value C as an addition. And since I want to have the same output, same ciphertext, and I have an additional data value in the intermediate value C, I just subtract this data value before inputting it to the second round function, and it will generate the same half of the ciphertext T. And again, this additional data value is still in the intermediate value C. So all I do is to subtract the output of last round function before adding it to the intermediate value C. So I will generate the same ciphertext from the input XY. All I'm trying to say is that these two triples have the same behavior of input encrypting XY into ZT. Okay? And this is not only for 3-round Feistel networks. We can generalize it for an arbitrary number of Feistel networks. You probably have to believe me because it's not so intuitive, it's a bit counterintuitive. But what I'm trying to go from here is that this will give some power to the adversary. The power is going to be basically picking an arbitrary input Y and evaluating the first round function on this arbitrary input Y arbitrarily. So this will give just one input-output of the round functions for each tables that I will have for the Feistel networks. And this will guarantee that I will still have the same input-output behavior of the real round functions that I will use for encryption. Okay. So, switching the gears, there is already no meet in the middle attack invented by Diffie-Hellman in the late 70s. And basically, I'm not going to talk about the idea, but the input to this attack is the set of non-plaintext ciphertext pairs with some number of with some Q, and it will output the full tables for all the round functions. And the query complexity can be taken as information theoretical bound, which is R over 2 times n, and the time complexity of the attack is just as I showed you here. So I'm just going to use this to compare our algorithm with meet in the middle attack, because it's the widely known generic attack on Feistel networks that we can think of. And now I'm going to talk about our attack, but before that I need to introduce you some notations. And I'm going to start with a partial table. Probably you already got the idea of table, it's just a round function. And for the partial table, instead of defining all the mapping for inputs to their outputs, we have just a subset of inputs that is mapped to their outputs. And in here we see that we just have 5 inputs are mapped to their outputs, the rest is empty. We don't know how to evaluate them. And we have a notion of density of a partial table, and it's just the ratio of the cardinality of the partial table that we can evaluate. We can map to the corresponding outputs to the size of the domain. So we have n inputs defined in this partial table, and n is the domain, so we have 6 over n as the density of this partial table. And next notation is the extension of a partial table. So we already have a partial table with some density, given density, and the extension is basically just introducing new input to outputs or mapping of some inputs to the outputs, and this will make the density bigger than the previous table that I'm extending. And we have a notion of tuple. This is basically a set of partial tables, and this tuple is basically introduced because of the R rounds of Feistel network. So since I have R rounds, I expect to have R tables. So in when I talk about tuple, it will always consist of R partial tables. And there is an elementary tuple that I will start the algorithm with. It is basically a tuple with R partial tables, and each partial tables will have density 1 over n. Okay. And another notion, I'm not done yet, a compatibility of a tuple with known set of message ciphertext pairs. And in this set of plaintext message ciphertext pairs, we say that it's compatible if there exists an extension of each table such that each of these messages is encrypted to encrypted to their corresponding ciphertext. Okay. And I promise I'm done now. So last notation is pool. Basically, it is just a set of tuples. So each tuple consists of R tables, and pool size could be anything from 1 to n. But each tuples will have R partial tables. So starting the algorithm, it's a non-plaintext attack. So I have a set of plaintext ciphertext pairs as my input, and the size of this set is Q, and I will output the full tables for f0 until fr minus 1, which is the full tables of round functions. And since we are interested in one of the equivalent set of round functions, and I showed you a way to make it really flexible by just picking arbitrarily inputs and mapping them to arbitrary outputs, I'm going to start with an elementary tuple that encrypts an arbitrarily picked message ciphertext message to its corresponding ciphertext. So I pick a message P0 and C0, it's a pair, and I will just generate a tuple that will encrypt this message P0 to its ciphertext. Okay? I can do that. The adversary has this power because of the equivalent set of round functions. And I'm going to also show you on the way how the size of the pool changes. So now we have, of course, in logarithmic scale, because it's going to get really big. So in the first iteration, I have only one tuple. In the second iteration, I will look for all possible extension of tuple that I had in the previous pool, which has only one tuple. That will encrypt to P1, that will encrypt P1 into C1. This choice of P1 to P1, C1 is also arbitrary. You can pick any plaintext ciphertext, which should not be equal to the previous one. And when I'm extending on the way, I will also check if there is any compatibility issue with the rest of the plaintext ciphertext pairs that I haven't encrypted yet. Okay. So the pool size will get bigger because I'm looking for all the possible extensions. It will get really big even in the first step, and for the third step, similarly, I will pick an arbitrary message ciphertext pair, call it P2, C2, and I will look for all possible extension of the tuples that I have from the previous step that will encrypt P2 to C2, and I will also check if there is any compatibility issue with the rest of the plaintext ciphertext pairs. Okay. Again, the pool size is increasing, and at some point, the pool size will stop increasing and it will start decreasing. And this point is called critical point, where the pool reached the maximum point. this is important because all the complexity analysis will be based on the size of this pool, the maximum size of the pool. And at the end, the qth step, finally, we will be able to reach a pool whose size is only 1 with a full, with a tuple consists of only full tables. So at this point, I will stop the algorithm, no more step, and we recovered the full tables for Feistel network for R rounds. And the time complexity for this algorithm is given here. It's a bit messy, but it was also very messy to analyze it to come up with this formula. This is a non-plain text version of our algorithm. We have a chosen plain text version as well, but in here we don't need to really optimize it for Q because Q appears only here, and this works for any complexity query Q. Okay. So now what we need to look at is compare the algorithm with meet in the middle, and I want you to remember that R, number of rounds, was 8 for FF3 and 10 for FF1 that I was interested in. And on the y-axis we will have n over here, and again I was interested in seeing how the security of Feistel networks is for a small n. So as you can see, the T-iter complexity of iter algorithm that I shown you is much bigger when we have this curve. These are equal to each other, T-iter and T-min. But for this side, upper side of the curve, T-iter behaves really bad. But again, I was interested in already with R equal to 8 and R equal to 10, which is standardized in NIST. And I also wanted to look at when we meet the 128 bits of security or 256 bits of security, and those lines represent that for the parameters, these parameters of R and N, we had 128 bits of security for Feistel networks. So this line, this part that is below this curve, means that for these parameters we cannot reach 180 bits of security for the attack that I give with the theoretical analysis that we provide. That means that still, so for 10 was the standardized the domain size for Feistel network, and we had this small gap. This is 18, I believe it's N was 18. For FF3, it's below that, we don't have the security of 128 bits. And for, I believe this was 11, so below 11 we don't have 128 bits of security for FF1. Again, for the theoretical bounds that I was talking about. Now, I want to implement this with small parameters because it was really, you saw the crazy time complexity, so we cannot probably implement it for R, big R, 8 or 10, but we implemented it for R equal to 5 and equal to 8, and with the query complexity 40. And the number of runs that we had was 100, and the success was 100% success. And the maximum size of the pool was the average of the largest observed pool size among all the successful runs. As you can see, our complexity T-iter was a little bit, not a little bit, actually quite underestimated. So there is a gap between the theoretical results that we had and the practical results that I can show you here. This can find many explanations. The first one that I can tell you is that we run the algorithm for really small r, and n is okay because I mean n equal to 10 basically was what I was targeting. It's a little bit smaller than what I was supposed to use, but still better than the number of rounds I was supposed to use. So I'm trying to say maybe for the small parameters that I picked, it doesn't behave as well. The theoretical, it doesn't meet the theoretical complexity. So this could be one thing. And another thing is, during the analysis, we needed to make some assumptions for the dissemination of we were measuring how the pool, size of the pool will behave. Sometimes it will increase and then it will start decreasing. And we were making some assumptions on this behavior. Maybe these assumptions are not realistic. This could be another explanation. We don't know yet. But nevertheless, I want to show you the other results, practical results that we have. And for this one, I'd like to show you that we can use an abort strategy, which means that if we want to abort when the theoretical limit or some limit that I will define was reached. So the first row that I'm showing you uses no abort strategy, so which means that we will never abort, we will just let the algorithm run as it is, and we get 100% of success. But for the second, third, and fourth row, as I write here, the abort will happen when we reach the maximum size of the pool as t etar times n, and t etar times n squared. So I'm not showing any result over here. It is because I'm looking at the maximum pool, max pool, when we have some successful runs. So for those, I don't have any successful runs, which means that the maximum size of the pool always bigger than n etar times n. So when we look at the t etar times n, when we look at the t etar times n squared, we have small success probability, and in that case, the average of the largest observed pool is t etar times n to the 1.76, which is close to n squared. T etar times n squared is okay. So another thing we tried throughout the way for these experiments, because we are still trying to find a meaningful result, or at least a matching result with the theoretical bounds that we had. So we decided to have some optimized implementation. Basically, I'm cheating a little bit when I say optimized algorithm, because it's not optimizing in the sense of using software or parallelizing or anything. It is basically changing the algorithm a little bit to run it faster. So in that case, we have some better results, still not meeting the theoretical results, but again, we can read the results. Results are better than when we don't have any optimization. So I can show you the results for r equal to 5 and n equal to 10 now. It's similar, like the behavior is similar, so I don't have much to add on that. And so I'm gonna just conclude my talk by saying that maybe we need to understand Feistel networks over small domains before we use them for formal preserving encryption, which is very big, I think, important primitive that people started immediately using in industry, in real cryptography. And we can say that for theoretical results, FF1 and FF3 fails for some small domains. Thank you.
Do you have any questions for Betty? Questions? I'm curious if there are other than Feistel alternatives based on symmetric structure, non-well symmetric primitives for formal preserving encryption over small domains.
I think there are some techniques, but they are not practical enough. There is, I forgot the name, but I think it was a random walking that you can use AES, but it's not practical enough because it uses like maybe millions of AES in order to have the same format, which, because in formal preserving encryption we try to have the same format of the plain text and the ciphertext. So there are some ways to do that, but not practical enough. So those are the only practical ones, as I know. And as I also know, they don't want to increase the number of rounds because it affects the performance a lot.
Okay. Thank you. No questions? Okay, let's thank the two again. Okay, the next talk is going to be by Ralph Ankele, and it's on differential cryptanalysis of round-reduced sparks, 64 and 128. Thank you, Ralph.
Thank you for the introduction. So this is joint work with Xaxis from Bauhaus University in Weimar. So let's start. So as a motivation, if we look at S-box-based ciphers, they have an easy security argument due to the wide trail strategy. But there are also some bad things about it. So you normally have to store them as a big table when you implement them, and they also are vulnerable to side-channel attacks. For AX-based ciphers, so there are good things is they are easily to use in lightweight implementations because all their functions are directly in the processors, and it's easy to write constant codes for this, so they are less vulnerable to side-channel attacks. For the bad things, the security is normally hard to justify because there are no provable bounds for that. Let's come to Sparks. Sparks is a family of block ciphers recently introduced at ACNS 2016, and it kind of tries to combine both worlds. So it's an AX-based cipher, so it's lightweight in software, resilient to side-channel attacks, and it is a substitution permutation network. So it's the first AX-based cipher that offers provable differential and linear bounds. And the name comes just by taking the first letters from everything, so Sparks. So for the wild trail strategy, it was used to design the AES, and you can bound the probability, so the maximal expected differential characteristic probability of a trail is upper bounded by the probability of an S-box to the power of the number of active S-boxes. So for the long trail strategy, this was introduced with Sparks. So what they claim is that if there is, what they say for the moment, just assume that an ARX box is something similar than an S box, just it has AX function inside. And what they do is, so they use several numbers, numbers of these ARX boxes. So for here it's 4, and then they have a linear layer here. And what they say is, if there is no additional difference coming from here, then they foster some long trails, and so they can bound the probability of these trails, so they don't have to compute E of 12, so they can do it with 34 to the power. And so in a comparison, so as design principle, so when you use large and weak S-boxes, it's better to use long trails than to go for diffusion. and therefore the linear layer must be small. So if you look at the wild trace strategy, so normally the S boxes are small and cheap, but the linear layers are normally based on MDS matrices, so they are normally expensive and complex. But for the long trace strategy, the designers say that S boxes, or in that case the AIX boxes, are large and expensive, but therefore the linear layer has to be cheap and simple. So our contributions, the designers themselves already have an attack on 15 rounds. So it's an integral attack based on the division property. And there was at Africa Crypt 2017, there was 2 attacks on with impossible differentials on 15 and 16 rounds. And so we also looked at differential cryptanalysis. So we propose some truncated differential attacks, rectangle attacks, and some yo-yo attacks. All of them on 16 rounds. So as an outline, I will first give an overview on sparks. Then I will tell you a little bit about the search for optimal differential trails. Then I will explain the truncated differential attack and then our rectangle attacks. So sparks, as I mentioned before, is a family of block ciphers. It's designed according to the long trail strategy. It's denoted like sparks NK, where N stands for the block size and K stands for the key size. And it's an AIX based cipher, so it only needs 16-bit operations and only needs XORs, additions and rotations. And sparks comes in 3 instances. So one is sparks 64-128, one is sparks 128-128, and one is sparks 128-56. And what they also have, so they have some rounds and some steps. And for the smaller version, they have just 3 rounds per step, and for the larger versions, they have 4 rounds per step. What I mean with that is exactly that. So what they define by a round is 1 layer of these AIX boxes. So they have 2 here, and they have several rounds, and then they have a linear layer, and everything together is 1 step. And for the key schedule, they just use an initial master key, and they update it to get some more, but I will explain it a little later in more details. So how does this AIX boxes I'm talking about look like? So so we have several AIX boxes for each round. There is 1, and actually in one of these AIX boxes there is one thing that they call a spec key. For some of you it looks quite similar to spec, and it actually is quite similar to spec. The only thing is that in spec the key is added here, but for spec key the key is added to the whole state up here. So how does Spark 64 looks like? So it has 3 rounds as mentioned before here, and a linear layer here, and the linear layer looks like this, which is what they say copied from Neumann. And yeah, and they have kind of a Feistel structure in the end where they switched So how does there are some properties about the key schedule. So the key schedule looks like this. So they have again an AIX box here. They have some modular additions here. They add some round constant here, and then they just shift it on. And there's a property. So if you that was observed by the paper on Africa Crypt. So if you guess this key value and this key value, you can actually get 4 more key values. So just by guessing 64-bit of the key values in round 3R, you can get the key values of round 3R plus 1 and the right value of round 3R plus 2. because I think nobody understood that. I actually have some pictures for that. So if you look at the key scanner, and we have several rounds of that, then the first three would be the one on the left side, and the second one, the one on the right side. So that's for the first round, second round, third round of step 0, and then from step 1, first round, second round, third round again. So if we guess just those two values, we can easily just by updating that here, we know that one, we know that one. We can also compute that down here because there's just a constant added here, so we also know that one. And we can also go down here, so we know and here over the AX box, and we also know that one. So just by guessing those two values, we actually know the round keys of that round, and from that round the right side. So then to the how to find differential trails. So we implemented the differential behavior of sparks in a SAT-based tool. And so we used cryptanalysis, which is an open source based tool to search differential trails. And this tool uses itself crypto minisat and STPSM SAT and SMT server. And for optimal differential trails, so optimal trails possess an hourglass structure, which is something typical for AX-based structures. So normally you have you start with a difference in the middle, and then it just propagates upwards. And for an optimal trail, we also exploit the Feistel structure, and sometimes optimal trails don't always give the best differential. I will also present a paper on this at SAC in August. A little bit of advertisement, and so we also look at the differentials, and for 6 rounds, so 2 steps, they're actually quite easy to find, so in about 10 minutes, but that changes quite rapidly. So if we look at more rounds, so for example for 6 rounds, it's about 25 seconds, and for more rounds, for example for 10 rounds, it actually took about a month. One of the problems here is that with SAT solvers you can parallelize them, so there's not a lot of stuff on parallelizing SAT solvers, so that might be the reason, but we also tried to implement it in milk-based solvers, and we still have the problems that it's quite hard to find them. So we were interested also in boomerang attacks, because we couldn't find long trails with good probability. So that's why we tried boomerang attacks, so that we can combine some of the shorter trails. And we identified three types. One we called free middle, single-sided bottom and single-sided top. And the free middle one was the most promising one. So in this type, the middle step is free, and we also use the ladder switch, which I will explain later. And the top trail ends with a 0 difference in the left branch, and the bottom trail ends with a 0 difference in the right branch. So that's why we call it free middle. And I also have a picture for this. So the gray one here, the one where there's a difference, the white one where there's no difference. And if we look at the top trail, so it's over 3 rounds. So we have a negative value here and also here. But for that one, we don't count that one, we just count that one here. And for the bottom trail, we have again differences here, here, and here. And we also don't count that one, but we just count the one where we don't have a difference, so that's where we use the ladder switch. And so we can ignore the differences here and here. and still get like a whole free step in the middle. So for the single-sided bottom and top, look kind of the same, so the only difference is that, for example, here for the single-sided bottom, we have just one active one here. So now let's talk about the truncated differential attack. So truncated differentials were introduced by Knudsen et al. In 1905, and so in a truncated differential attack, we are only interested to specify the exact difference for some parts of the difference, and we leave it open for some other parts, so that with that we can look at more differences. And in our attack on sparks, we exploit the Feistel structure. So the Feistel structure allows generic trails with just one active branch for almost 2 steps. And the final linear layer can easily be inverted. And what we observed was that after 5 steps, there's only one active branch after 5 steps. And in our attacks, we also exploit the property in the key scalar presented by the people at Africa Grid. So how does our truncated differential attack, so the trails, how do they look like? Look like this. So we do some key guessing, as I mentioned before here. So we can guess the keys in round 3, 4, and on the right side of round 5. We use an optimal trail for dead rounds here, and we use truncated and truncated trail here. And what we see is after 5 steps, we have one branch not active here, but just the branch is active. And the last final layer is easily invertible. So for our attack, we also use a trick by Laurent, presented in Eurocrypt 2016. So what he defined is a function. So if we have a difference delta here, and the difference is just when we XOR the pairs, then we can define a linear function f, and this function has rank n-1, so that when the function has the difference we want, then it outputs the all zero string, so it means that there is a collision. And we use that so that we don't have to look at all the different pairs. So we actually just have to look at the output of the function and check when it collides. So for our attack, we used to do the structures on the ciphertext side, so we start the attack on the ciphertext side, and we obtain the plain texts from a 16-round decryption oracle. We guess the keys, as I mentioned before, in round 3, 4, and the right half of round 5. Then we re-encrypt the plain text and store only the ones that that collide here. And then we use the function as I mentioned above and discard all the pairs that are not colliding. And for each colliding pair we increment the counter for the current key candidate, and in the end we output the keys in descending order so that we find the correct key. So for the attack complexity, the time complexity is 2 to the 93, memory complexity is 2 to the 61, and data complexity is 2 to the 32. So I'm not going into details here. If you're interested, read the paper or ask me later. So for rectangle attacks, so you was already explaining the boomerang attacks. So in the boomerang attacks, just a short recap, we connect to high probable differentials, and we split the cipher into 2 parts. So we have one function here and one part of the cipher here, and then we have a difference down here, and then we shift the difference, have a difference up here, And yeah, we combine that in a chosen plaintext and adaptively chosen ciphertext attack. But for the rectangle attack, what we do is, because we don't want to have the adaptively chosen ciphertext attack, we can transform it in a purely chosen plaintext attack. And the core idea is we just encrypt a lot of plaintexts and hope that they will do the boomerang. And yeah, that works. So in our rectangle attack, we again exploit the trick in the key schedule when guessing key bits. We use the ladder switch for the middle round, so that allows us to pass the switching step with probability 1. And so the ladder switch just says that we don't have to look at the whole middle part, so we can also just look at some parts and connect them as we want. And we also experimentally verified our boomerang switch, because there's a paper by Murphy saying that yeah, not all of the boomerangs actually have some probability, so there are also some with probability 0. And yeah, we verified that, and we looked at the middle rounds, and we concluded that our attack should be valid. So how does our attack differential trace again look like? So on the left we have our top trail over 3 steps, where yeah, we just look on this side, so we leave that open and ignore it. And for the bottom trail, we again have 3 steps up here, and we ignore on this time this step here, so we have all 0 difference here through the 3rd step. And again, we do the key guessing on top. And as I mentioned before, we just use that parts from the top trail and the bottom trail and connect it with the ladder switch. So our attack steps, we choose 2 to the m ciphertext pairs. So we again start our attack on the ciphertext side. We choose it with the difference we want to have. We again ask for a corresponding plaintext. We guess the keys again in rounds 3, 4, and 5. 5 just the right part. We partially re-encrypt our plaintext pairs, and to round 4 and round 5 here. We apply again the function, the linear function by Laurent here, and just check which ones are colliding, and then we increment the key counter for the correct key guess, and then to get the remaining keys we just encrypt the most probable plaintext pair and go all the way to the ciphertext. And in the end we can output the key candidate. For the attack complexity, so the time complexity now is 2 to the 122.2. The memory complexity is 2 to the 61.6, and the data complexity is 2 to the 59.6. So in conclusion, we presented 2 standard differential attacks on 16 rounds of sparks. One is based on truncated differential, the second one is based on rectangle attacks. In our attacks we exploit the Feistel structure of sparks, we exploit property in the key schedule, and we also used some clustering of the differential trace, so we looked at differentials as well. And I want to emphasize our attacks do not threaten the security of sparks, so it's still secure, it has enough rounds. But yeah, we provide some deeper insight in the security against single key attacks. And I also want to give you the link to our ePrint paper. So there's the full version. There are also some yo-yo attacks that we did. We're still working on sparks, so hopefully we have some better attacks soonish. And we also, in our ePrint paper, we also have a link to a Git repository where all our tests and differential trails are, so to encourage other people to continue working on it.
any questions for Ralph? No questions? Okay, thank you again. Thank you, Ralph. Okay, and the final talk of today has a very intriguing title. It starts with "Can Caesar beat Galois?" It's about the robustness of Caesar candidates against nonce-reducing and high data complexity attacks. And it's going to be given by Serge Vadenet. Thank you, Serge.
Thank you very much. Thank you for everyone for staying here instead of watching a stupid game where Switzerland is losing. So we are going to talk about, not about Sweden against Switzerland, we are going to talk about Caesar against Galois. So here is Caesar. Caesar is an acronym for the Competition for Authenticated Encryption, Security, Applicability and Robustness. So it's a competition which started in 2014, where people were invited to submit some algorithm for authenticated encryption. And the goal of this competition was to come up with something which was essentially better than AES GCM. So Galois is here. So GCM is a Galois counter mode. So essentially the goal of Caesar is to make something better than Galois counter mode. So the goal of our work is to check if we somehow succeeded with this. So in authenticated encryption, you have a primitive with some inputs and some outputs. So I will show more detail about this. So we have an encryption algorithm. The encryption algorithm takes a nonce, which is a number which normally doesn't repeat. We have nonce n, we have some associated data a, we have a plain text m, we have a secret key k, and we produce ciphertext. There is another algorithm which is a decryption algorithm, which takes normally the same nonce, the same associated data, it takes the ciphertext and the same key, and normally it should produce the same plain text. These primitives are made such that if we feed the decryption with some message that we try to make ourselves without knowing the secret key, the decryption should fail. So we need some authentication somehow. So what was requested by Caesar or by authenticated encryption in general, we wanted to have a primitive which protects confidentiality and integrity. So in Caesar, so we wonder what it means. I will detail in a few moments. And the Caesar candidates could make some propose some extra information with their submission. So first, they could require that nonce don't repeat. So normally, I think that all candidates require that nonce do not repeat, and they should make some claim about the security, some security assessment, which is quantitative. Quantitative means the cost of an attack to succeed. So how much time does it cost to break the scheme, to break confidentiality or integrity, and how does it compare with things we are familiar with, typically to try to do some brute force attack against AES. So if we have some AES-based primitives, we have typically keys of 128 bits, and in general we have to face to some attacks which correspond to what we call the birthday bound, which is 2 to the 64 in that case. So for many algorithms, there are some attacks with complexity 2 to the 64 with a key of 128 bits. candidates could also assess on the robustness on their algorithm. Robustness means what happens if nonce repeat for whatever reason, because we can require that nonce doesn't repeat, but it's users who will use the algorithm which will decide if the nonce repeat or not. So maybe they can make mistakes, and we have seen in the past that even though it's required nonce not to repeat, nonce do repeat. So the problem is to check what are the damages if nonce ever repeat. Is it, do we lose just the message, the confidentiality of the message that we encrypted with this repeating nonce? Or is it a big disaster because we are leaking a secret key? It's not the same at all. So that's what we wanted to understand with this work. So we can wonder, why do we care about robustness at all? So first, robustness corresponds to the R of CISA. So robustness was an original goal of the CISA competition. And the original goal was to offer some better algorithms than the ASGCM, which was available when the CISA competition started. So what's the problem with the GCM? We can wonder what's the problem with the Galois counter mode. So with ASGCM, we have some quite well understood security. There is a provable security if nonce do not repeat, and if we don't encrypt too much, say much lower than the birthday bound. So if we don't encrypt too many messages and we make sure that nonce don't repeat, we have a security proof, which it means that we are safe, assuming that AES is secure, and we all believe AES is secure. However, if these assumptions are not satisfied, so for instance, if there is any single nonce reuse, it's a big disaster. We are leaking essentially one key which is able to make some universal forgeries and to make some decryption attacks as well. So it's a big deal. Any single nonce reuse is a big deal for AES GCM. And we have seen last year, so there was an attack presented at Black Hat last year, where it was shown that some implementation use repeating nonce with AES GCM, and it's a big deal. So the speaker have started their talk by hacking the MI5 website like this. We can wonder also what happens if we reach the birthday bounds. Then if we try to encrypt many plain text to the 64 or beyond without repeating the nonce. And for ASGCM, it's also a big problem, especially when we use nonces greater than 128 bits, and some implementation do. It's rare, but it can happen. And then we have some attacks this way. So GCM has a kind of reputation to be somehow brittle, and that's why CISA started. So normally, we should come up with something which is essentially better than GCM. So in our work, we wanted to analyze all the CISA candidates in the third round, because otherwise there are too many. So in the third round, we look at all the CISA candidates, and we try to assess their robustness with these two types of attacks. So we wonder what happens if nonce reuse. We wonder what happens if we encrypt many messages. So it's a bit controversial work, because essentially we kind of break all CISA candidates, but we shouldn't say we break them all, because we are most likely to be reviewed by one author of one CISA candidate. So we just assessing the robustness of the CISA candidate. Okay. So in our method, we look at several dimensions. First, we look at how many messages we need in our attack, how many nonce reuse we need. So for every single nonce, we wonder if we use it only once, or if we use it several times, and how many times. And we wonder for each candidate what kind of attack we can do. So it's a disaster if we can make a key recovery attack, but otherwise we can sometimes make only some decryption attack, which can be chosen plaintext attacks or chosen plaintext and ciphertext attack. We wonder if we make a universal forgery. We wonder if we make these attacks in a reusable way, which means that maybe these attacks have a high complexity, but once we have run them once, then the second attack is much cheaper. So this, the cost of running this attack can be amortized if we want to run it several times. So we wonder if the attacks are reusable. So that's what we did. Okay, and we ended up in sorting the attacks that we have in 6 categories, and that's what I will describe in a moment. First, the attack model. So in the attack model, we have an adversary, and the adversary can play with the encryption algorithm. The encryption algorithm knows the secret key. The adversary doesn't know the secret key, of course. It can also sometimes play with decryption algorithm, which knows the secret key as well. So the adversary can send some triplet N, A, M to the encryption oracle and get the ciphertext, and with the restriction that N doesn't repeat or repeats a number of times, which is bounded in our attack. The attack can be either chosen plaintext or chosen plaintext and ciphertext. So if it is chosen plaintext, the adversary cannot play with the decryption algorithm. If it is chosen plaintext ciphertext, it can. And we wonder what is the amount of data. So if we want to make a forgery, we have to produce a tuple NAC, which decrypts correctly, which doesn't produce an error. And this shouldn't have been the result of a submission to the encryption oracle. Forgery can be universal. Universal, it means that the adversary will be able to forge a triplet for an arbitrary message, M. So we produce a message M together with the triplet NAC. Or semi-universal. In a semi-universal, so maybe there is a restriction of which nonce will come up in the final triplet, or the associated data. Maybe it will be fixed or imposed by the attack. And we wonder if the forgery is reusable or not. So reusable, it means that once we succeeded to make one forgery, the next forgery is much cheaper. So that's for forgery. And for decryption attack, so we're given some NAC triplet, and the purpose is to decrypt it, to find the corresponding message without querying to the decryption oracle. And again, we wonder if this attack is reusable or not. We also have a key recovery attack in which, by playing with these two oracles, we want to recover the secret key. Okay, so these are the types of attacks, and here are the classes of algorithms that we find. So we have the classes A, B, C, D, E, F. Essentially, to have a good algorithm, you should be in the upper class, the class F. Algorithms in the lower ones are algorithms which are not so good, let's say. In the classes A and B, we have some algorithms which are vulnerable to nonce reuse attacks. So if the nonce repeats, then we can break them. So if we are in class A, we can, it's nonce-respecting. Class A and B are nonce-respecting, so it means that we never repeat a nonce when we try to encrypt. So in class A and B, we have attacks which uses lots of messages. So in class A, we are exactly at the birthday bound, and in class B, we need more data than the birthday bound. In classes C and D, we have algorithms which are vulnerable to nonce reuse attacks, and with low number of messages. So in class C, we have algorithms which are vulnerable to very small nonce reuse and very small data complexity, and we require them to be reusable, and we want to have universal forgery and decryption attack in class C. So we have all the type of attacks, so it means that we can essentially break all security notions. In class D, we may have one or the other. Then in class E, we have algorithm for which we need an nonce reuse and a lot of data to break. Okay, and at the birthday bound to the 64. In class F, we require more than a birthday bound amount of data, and we need a lot of nonce reuse. Okay, so without more discussion, here are our results. So here is our table with all the algorithms that we have in the third round of the CISA competition, and you can see in which classes they are. So remember that the algorithm in base class are in class F. So we have only one which resists to all these type of attacks. So you can see where is ASGCM. So ASGCM appears at 2 positions. So this is a normal ASGCM, which is used by many people. And this ASGCM is vulnerable to attacks which can use a nonce twice. So you use you have only 2 queries to an encryption oracle, and you use the same nonce for both queries. And with this attack, you can make a universal forgery and a CPA decryption attack. There is another occurrence of ASGCM here, so that's the ASGCM when we use big nonces. So normally in ASGCM, the nonce is 96 bits, but if we use bigger nonce, which is feasible, we have other attacks which are at the birthday bound. So at the birthday bound, we can have a universal forgery and a CCA decryption attack. So that's where ASGCM here is. And you can see that in those classes, you have algorithms which are not much better. So maybe the worst that we can mention is Xaxis here, for which we have a key recovery attack. So with Xaxis, if we repeat a nonce, if we use a nonce 30 times, if there is a nonce which is repeated 30 times, we can reveal the secret key. Okay? Maybe 30 times is maybe not so realistic, but you have also some other cases, for instance I cannot see, OCB. With OCB, if you have a nonce that you use twice, you have also some kind of terrible attacks like universal forgery and CCA decryption attacks. Okay, so these are our results, and what's our contribution? So compared to what was announced by the CISA submitters, the CISA submitters made some claims that their algorithm resists to some nonce misuse attacks or to attacks which requires lots of data. So this is a table that we fill based on the claims by the submitters. So you can see, for instance, that these algorithms were claimed to resist to nonce misuse attack with tiny complexity. So Xaxis 2, Colm, and AZ. You can see that Xaxis 2 and Colm are here, AZ is there. Okay, so it's not vulnerable to nonce misuse attack, which is compatible to what the author claimed, but we have a terrible attack at the birthday bound. Okay, that's for AZ. And for this class of algorithm, so these algorithms are supposed to resist to attacks at the birthday bound, but not beyond. So you can wonder, where are those algorithms? So this is only the information that we can have if we read the specification by the submitters. And if we look at where they are in the table, you can see that they are very spread in the table. They appear at very different places. Regarding to this aspect, so we believe that our result shows more useful comparison with the algorithms when we try to compare them and to see which one resists to this type of attack. Okay, so now maybe I will show you only one example, Xaxis 2. And the type of attack that we consider, so DXIS2 here has an attack where you have a parameter in the attack, which is a parameter m. So if we repeat announce 2 to the power m times, we have an attack with data complexity to the 128 minus m, whatever is the value of m. Okay? So, how does it work? So DXIS2 can be simplified like this. So essentially we have nonce, associated data, and a plain text, and we have 3 algorithms here, F which depend on the key, F prime depending on the key, and E depending on the key. So first we process the associated data, and then we take the nonce, the result, and the plain text to produce the tag which is put in the ciphertext. And then we process this tag, the nonce and the plain text, to produce the rest of the ciphertext C. So that's how it works. The author of this algorithm have proven this type of security bound. They have shown that an adversary has an advantage which is bounded by those parameters, where mu is the number of nonce repeats, and sigma is the data complexity, and Q is the number of queries. It's also connected to the data complexity. And what we have found as an attack, it's an attack where essentially we try to find a collision on Fk on the associated data. So essentially, assuming that you can repeat nonce many times in such a way that you can find a collision with the associated data. So here you have a pair of associated data that you can change easily in any other plain text query. So that's how it works. First we fix the nonce and the m. So we fix n and m, and we repeat the encryption with 2 to the power m different associated data that we pick at random. And we look at the tag at the end. So if we obtain a collision, it means that we have a collision here, and with probability 1/2, so we have already a collision there. So if we are lucky, so we can find this way a collision. But if 2 to the m is too low, maybe we will find no collision at all, so we'll have to repeat this. So what's the probability to find a collision? Essentially, the probability to find a collision with 2 to the n repetition is 2 to the power 2n minus 128 due to the birthday paradox. So if we have this probability of success, we need to repeat these attacks 2 to the power 128 minus 2n times, and eventually we find a collision. So with this attack, you obtain a data complexity which is the number of repetitions multiplied by the number of queries, so it's 2 to the 128 minus m, and we have a number of repetitions per nonce, which is 2 to the power m. And we can look now at how it interprets in this formula. So if you replace mu by 2 to the power m and sigma by 2 to the 128 minus m, you obtain here a constant. So this is the dominant part of the security analysis. So it means that we have found an attack which matches the bound proven by the author, so it confirms the tightness of the bound. So that's the result about DXIS2. And so now we announce a finalist of CSAR. So in the current state, so this analysis was made with the third round candidates, and now we have some finalists. So we can wonder, where are the finalists in the table? So the finalists are here. So you have OCB, AGIS 128, ACON 128, Boris 640, ASCON 128, Column, and DXIS2. So we have removed some algorithms with problematic robustness, but we still have some more. So normally we should announce the final portfolio of CSAR very soon, and now we will have to decide which one to keep in this list of finalists. So to conclude, so we have seen that we have actually some algorithms in the category A and C which are essentially not better than GCM. We can find some which are better, but it's not a general case. There are many candidates which do not compare so well with GCM. So we can wonder if it is okay. Fortunately, we didn't keep the weakest algorithm in the finalist, but we can continue to see how it will evolve. Now, this I told you that this result is quite controversial, and we anticipated some objection. Actually, these objections are not anticipation at all, because this results were presented by Damien, my co-author Damien, in Dutch tool earlier this year. And we have received this type of comments. The first one, the attacks do not invalidate the claims of the author. So that's perfectly true. We do not disprove any result by the author of the candidates. The authors claim no security for non-free use or birthday-bound attacks. But the same people who say that they didn't claim anything, they are very critical against GCM because of these attacks. So we can wonder if it is really coherent to have this type of objection. And another comment that we receive is that a competent engineer doesn't need robustness. Okay. So we have seen that these problems due to misuse happens. I wonder if it implies that there are no coherent engineer, no competent engineer. I don't think so. I think there are many competent engineers. Nevertheless, this problem of robustness is a real problem. Nonce will repeat for whatever reason, because we use the bad random generator, because the nonce are too short and they repeat eventually because of many kind of situations. So we have to care about this and try to favor algorithms which are more robust. As another contribution, we confirm that the bound of Xaxis2 are tight, and we have found several attacks which are in the paper, but I don't have time to show them. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Serge. Are there questions for Serge? So would you say, my question is, would you say that if you are to design a new authenticated encryption design, you would do it with robustness in mind against misuse?
Oh, yes, for sure. I think that this, now if we start a CISA competition again, we will have some candidates which are completely different, and I presume that they will all take into account this notion of robustness and try to be careful about misuse of the algorithm.
Related, is there any other notion of robustness that you would consider?
Any other notion? There were also some problems about algorithms in which you have some parameters that you can change. For instance, the size of a ciphertext, the size of a tag. So for some algorithm, you can change the size of the tag, and if you misuse this opportunity, you will have also some security problem. So like for instance, if you use the same key for different tag lengths, you have lots of problems. So if you have also some notion of robustness with respect to this.
Let's thank Serge again.